Okay, good morning, all of you. I'm Dr. Karthik, Assistant Professor, Department of General Medicine, Gayatri Vidyapeeth Medical College. Today, the medicine topic for discussion is malabsorption syndromes. So, the learning objectives for today's class. By the end of the class, you should know what is the definition of malabsorption syndrome, to list the various etiologies of malabsorption syndrome, understand the clinical features and management of various malabsorption syndromes. Before going to the topic proper, let us have an overview of physiology of absorption. So you already know, you have read in the physiology. Normally the food which we eat from the oral cavity, it goes into the esophagus, then into the stomach, then duodenum, then small intestine, then large intestine, and after the digestion process is over, the fecal matter comes out to the anus. So in the oral cavity, there is mechanical digestion involving chewing and swallowing. Similarly, the digestion of carbohydrates and fat starts in the oral cavity. We have salivary amylase, which starts the digestion of carbohydrates. Then, esophagus acts only as a conduit for the passage of the food. Then, when the food reaches the stomach, we have mechanical digestion, including peristaltic mixing and propulsion. Then, chemical digestion of proteins and fats. So, pepsin is the enzyme which is there in the stomach, which starts the digestion of proteins. And absorption of lipid soluble substances such as alcohol and aspirin occurs in the acidic environment in the stomach. Then the food reaches the duodenum. So when the food reaches the duodenum, as soon as the pylorus opens and the food reaches the first part of the duodenum, secretions of the pancreas. Pancreas secretes all its enzyme into through the ampulla of Vater in the second part of the duodenum. Here, the digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats continue. Then in the small intestine, we have mechanical digestion, including mixing, propulsion, primarily by segmentation. Then chemical digestion of carbohydrates, fats, polypeptides, and nucleic acids. So carbohydrates, these macromolecules are broken down into smaller units. So carbohydrates are converted into glucose, fats are converted into glycerol and fatty acids, then polypeptides are converted into amino acids. And the absorption of these micromolecules occurs in the small intestine. So absorption of the peptide, amino acids, glucose, fructose, fats, and also minerals and vitamins. So we have fat soluble vitamins as well as water soluble vitamins. All these vitamins are absorbed in the small intestine at different parts. So minerals like important minerals like iron, calcium, and magnesium are also absorbed. Then after the absorption process is completed in the small intestine, the digested food passes into the large intestine, where there is predominantly absorption of the water. So mechanical digestion including segmental mixing and propulsion. No chemical digestion except by the bacteria. So all the enzymes, there are no enzymes here for digestion of the any food, any substance. So only the bacteria which are present, colonic bacteria, they secrete some enzymes and there is some chemical reaction. And importantly, there is absorption of iron, water, mineral, vitamins, and organic molecules. So this is the gross overview of what are the steps of absorption of food which we eat and where at which site different types of food are absorbed. So the main absorptive function is done by the small intestine. So all the peptides, carbohydrates, fats, nucleic acids, vitamins, minerals are predominantly absorbed in the small intestine. So if there is any disease of the small intestine, it will lead to impaired absorption of all these molecules, leading to what is called as malabsorption syndrome. So malabsorption syndrome is basically the pathology of small intestine. So it is a disorder of the small intestine where the intestine is not able to absorb the nutrients in the appropriate way. So it is defined as disorders in which there is disruption of absorption and disruption of digestion and nutrient absorption. So malabsorption is a disruption of digestion and nutrient absorption. So this is an important slide. So as we have seen, different carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and vitamins and minerals are absorbed in different parts of the small intestine, different parts of the intestine. So if it is defective, what are the clinical manifestations and what are the laboratory findings? How do you know that different proteins, different carbohydrates or fat are malabsorbed? So for all the malabsorption syndromes, these are the common clinical features and laboratory findings. So there may be steatorrhea. Steatorrhea is bulky, light-colored, fat-laden stools because there is decreased absorption of fat. The stool is consisting of the stool is fatty and it is bulky, light-colored. Okay, so this is the clinical manifestation. Patient usually present with diarrhea with bulky stools which do not flush on putting water. So what is the laboratory finding you elicit you find it if you examine the fecal matter, there is increased fecal fat. So similarly in the blood there is decreased serum cholesterol because there is decreased absorption of the cholesterol. Similarly decreased serum carotene and decreased fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E and K. So similarly diarrhea. Diarrhea has increased fecal water. So whenever there is defective absorption in the small intestine, all the bile acids, bile salts reach the large intestine causing secretory or osmotic diarrhea. The inabsorbed carbohydrates, they reach the large intestine and they cause osmotic diarrhea. So there is increased fecal water producing diarrhea. So this is assessed by measuring the increase in the stool weight and increase in the fecal fat and increasing stool, there is increased stool osmolality gap. So if there is no nutrients are not absorbed properly, then there is no nutrition to the individual. There will be weight loss and muscle wasting. Similarly, as you all know, the iron is absorbed in the duodenum. So whenever there is proximal part of small intestine is involved, there is decreased absorption of iron leading to microcytic anemia. So it can, if you measure the laboratory value, if you measure the serum iron, it is low. Similarly, B12 and folic acid, they are absorbed through the terminal ileum through the help of intrinsic factor. So if there is a pathology of the terminal ileum, then there is decreased absorption of B12 and folic acid leading to macrocytic anemia. So similarly, if there is decrease in the absorption of calcium and magnesium, the clinical manifestations are paresthesias, tetany, positive Trocheus and Chvostek sign. There is decreased absorption of calcium leading to bone pain, pathological fracture and skeletal deformity. Suppose the vitamin K is fat soluble vitamin. If it is decreased in the quantity in the body, then we have bleeding tendency. And it is laboratory, you measure the value of PT-INR. So there is prolonged PT-INR. Similarly, there is malabsorption of proteins. So there is decrease in the total body proteins, decrease in the albumin, increase in the fecal loss of alpha-1 and antitrypsin. So loss of protein leads to hypoalbuminemia and this causes decreased oncotic pressure leads to edema. Similarly, if there is a defective absorption or intolerance of absorption of lactose, suppose the patient takes milk and there is abnormal lactose intolerance, then we'll have intestinal manifestations like bloating, cramps and diarrhea. So this chart is, these are the common clinical manifestations and laboratory findings in all the malabsorption syndrome. Depending on the site of pathology, and there is a variability of the symptoms. So malabsorption are the diseases of small intestine and these are the clinical manifestations and laboratory findings. So these are common for all the malabsorption syndrome which we are going to discuss today. So what are the etiology of this malabsorption syndrome? There are various etiologies like celiac disease, tropical sprue, Whipple's disease, small bowel overgrowth syndrome or bacterial overgrowth, then short bowel syndrome. Let us discuss all the diseases one by one. Celiac disease. So celiac disease is also called celiac sprue or just sprue and or gluten enteropathy. So it is an inflammatory disorder of the small bowel. So it occurs only in genetically susceptible individuals, which is evident by occurrence of the disease in first degree relatives 10% and there is a 75% concordance between monozygotic twins. So this disease has genetic susceptibility. So it's only seen characteristically in patients with HLA, DQ2 or DQ8 antigen. So celiac disease occurs because of intolerance to wheat gluten. So the gluten which is present in the wheat and related cereals like rye, barley and oats, the patient is intolerant to the gluten. which produces an inflammatory and immunological response, leading to certain pathological features which impair the absorption of the nutrients. So it is most commonly seen in the northern Europe. So what is the pathophysiology? So the main important pathophysiological mechanism is mucosal damage. Mucosal damage occurs due to immunological response to gluten, and there is dysbiosis of the intestinal microbiota. So there is a characteristic intestinal flora for each and every part of the intestine normally, physiologically, but this is disturbed and there is dysbiosis. So various different microorganisms are seen to grow in the intestine. So as you can see now, in a patient with gluten intolerance, if the patient takes gluten peptides, they are absorbed by the villus border and taken up into the intestine, and there is deamidation of the gluten peptides by tissue transglutaminase. So this enzyme deamidates the gluten peptides, and the antigen presenting cells which have the HLA-DQ2, which is characteristic for the presentation of celiac disease, it takes up the antigen and presents it to the CD4 T helper cells. This in turn causes generation of interleukin 1, interferon gamma, and TNF alpha. This causes inflammation and accumulation of the lymphocytes within the epithelium. The intraepithelial lymphocytes accumulate. There's disruption of the brush border, leading to defective absorption of the nutrients. So this is the pathophysiology of celiac disease. So the transglutaminase deamidates the tissue tangle enzyme deamidates the gluten proteins. So what are the clinical manifestations? So celiac disease can present at any age because it is a genetic disease. It can present by birth. So how will you recognize celiac disease? So in infancy, the baby is mostly on the breastfeeding. So often when the infant, the weaning starts, when the weaning procedure starts and the cereals are given to the infant, then the symptoms starts appearing. The symptoms are in the form of diarrhea, malabsorption. So if there is decreased absorption, there is obviously no weight gain and failure to thrive. It may present in older children in the form of delayed growth. The child is not attaining the appropriate growth as per his age, and there may be pubertal delay, or there may be short stature because of impaired nutrients which are essential for growth and development. It may also present in the adults. So in the third and fourth decade, so there may be the disease may present. The male to female ratio, usually it is more common, twice more common in female than in males. They may present with non-specific symptoms like tiredness, weight loss because of folate or iron deficiency anemia. Or there may be oral ulcerations, dyspepsia, bloating. The undernutrition and decreased calcium may lead to osteoporosis. The anemia itself may lead to amenorrhea and infertility. So clinical features. So while clinical features, the common complaint will be failure to thrive or defect or delayed growth or delayed in attaining puberty or short stature. There may be loss of muscle mass and subcutaneous fat. Patient may have anemia, so pallor is evident. So there is loss of fat soluble as well as water soluble vitamins. So the vitamin K deficiency leads to easy bruising. Vitamin A deficiency leads to hyperkeratosis. Similarly, there may be bone pains because of decreased calcium. Peripheral neuropathy and ataxia due to defective absorption of the lipids or defective absorption of vitamin E, which is essential for neurological function. Similarly, if the patient has diarrhea, he may have hyperactive bowel sounds. Sometimes cutaneous manifestations are also present, which is also called dermatitis herpetiformis. It is a cutaneous variant of celiac disease. In this disease, you have skin rash characterized by pruritic papillovesicles, mostly seen on the extensor surface of the upper limb and the lower limb, as well as trunk. So these are the clinical manifestations of celiac disease. So how do you investigate? You have suspected a patient. A patient is of North European origin. He has family history of celiac disease, or is sensitive to gluten. He presents to you with abdominal symptoms like dyspepsia, diarrhea, or he may have short stature. So he presents to you. Then the definitive diagnosis of celiac disease is done by duodenal biopsy. So the duodenal biopsy, four biopsy are taken from the second part of duodenum, 4 pieces, and 1 from the duodenal bulb. So you can see on the picture on the right side, it is the normal duodenal mucosa. These are the normal villi. These are the crypts. So this is the normal structure. In patients with celiac disease, there is atrophy of the villi. There is blunting of the villus. Similarly, there is enlargement of the crypts and the infiltration of lymphocytes into the epithelial layer. So intraepithelial lymphocytes. So this is also called lymphocytic duodenosis. So there is villus atrophy and lymphocytic duodenosis. So antibodies. So the definitive investigation is biopsy, duodenal biopsy. Then it is an autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease. So we have antibodies. Antibodies like tissue transglutaminase antibodies and anti-endomysial antibodies. Anti-endomysial antibodies, some in some countries they are not recommended. Tissue transglutaminase antibodies are, and in countries like UK, there is TTG SAR is done, which is semi-quantitative, 95% sensitive and specific. It is more accurate in patients with IgA deficiency. So all these are IgA antibodies because they occur at the intestinal surface. They are IgA antibodies. There may be some patients who are IgA deficient. In them, IgG type of antibodies for these antigens are tested. As we have seen in the first slide, what are the hematological and biochemical manifestation you expect? So, as there is defective absorption, there may be microcytic or macrocytic anemia, decreased calcium and magnesium. The total proteins are decreased, albumin is decreased, and serum vitamin D is also decreased. If you perform the dual energy X-ray densitometry scan, there is decreased density of the bones or osteoporosis. So these are the manifestations of the disease. How do you manage? The management is just by gluten-free diet. So lifelong gluten-free diet is the only treatment. So the patient must be counseled to avoid dietary products which contain gluten. So the diet must be contain carbohydrates other than uh, uh, products other than those containing gluten. So frequent dietary counseling is required so that the patient maintains a lifelong gluten-free diet. And similarly, vitamin and mineral supplementations must be given. Similarly, calcium and vitamin D3 supplementation. So the patient must be followed up for the symptoms, new onset of symptoms, weight gain and nutritional status, and measurement of TTG and anti-endomysial antibodies as in the follow-up as and when possible. So if there is failure to respond to the gluten-free diet, then there should be repeat small bowel biopsies to know why the patient has not responded to the gluten-free diet. So in these cases, glucocorticoids or other immunosuppressive drugs can be given. Usually the patient responds well with lifelong gluten-free diet. So what are the complications? Due to lymphocytic duodenosis, there may be increased risk of malignancy like enteropathy associated T-cell lymphoma, small bowel carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma of the esophagus. Similarly, ulcerative jejuneileitis. Osteoporosis and osteomalacia are due to lack of vitamin D and calcium. So this completes the celiac disease. So celiac disease is basically an immunological response to gluten. So there is on duodenal biopsy, there is villus atrophy and enlargement of the crypts and lymphocytic duodenosis. So because gluten is the culprit, if we avoid the gluten in the diet, patient will respond, and lifelong gluten-free diet must be maintained by frequent dietary counseling. Because of the malabsorption of various nutrients, patient may present in a varied manner. So the second malabsorption syndrome we are going to discuss is tropical sprue. So tropical sprue, just like celiac sprue, is a chronic progressive malabsorption in a patient in or from the tropics. So it is mostly seen in tropical area. So the pathophysiology. Infectious agents are proposed to be the pathophysiological. So the malabsorption is triggered by some infectious agent. Usually the small bowel bacterial overgrowth is seen with Escherichia coli, Enterobacter, Klebsiella. So these infective agents are proposed to be the cause of malabsorption in the patients with tropical sprue. Clinical manifestations. Suppose the patient may present in an acute setting with diarrhea, abdominal distension, anorexia, fatigue, and weight loss. Suppose the patient may present over with a history of anemia, with a history of non-specific symptoms like fatigue, weight loss, anorexia over a period of time because of megaloblastic anemia or microcytic anemia. So how do you manage? So because infectious agents are proposed to be the cause of this sprue, which is seen in tropical areas, you give antibiotics, tetracycline 250 mg 4 times daily for 1 month. Similarly, folic acid and vitamin and mineral supplementation must be given. So prolonged treatment is required in order to decrease the burden of bacteria and decrease the symptoms. So tropical sprue is just like celiac flu, but the etiology is supposed to be an infectious agent. So you treat it by antibiotics and vitamin and mineral supplementation. Then the third disease is Whipple's disease. So Whipple's disease, it is a rare multi-system disease. So the cause in the Whipple's disease is Trophorima whipplei. It is a gram-positive bacteria. So it is usually seen in the 4th to 6th decade in male patients. So what is the pathophysiology of Whipple's disease? So usually the infection with Trophorima whipplei is there. The bacillus resides in the macrophages in the bowel mucosa. The villi are widened and flattened. Then there is obstruction of lymphatic drainage of the intestinal mucosa. Then there is fat malabsorption. As we all know, lipids are absorbed through the lymphatic system. So whenever there is obstruction of lymphatic drainage, there is fat malabsorption. This fat malabsorption will lead to presentation of the different symptoms in the form of steatorrhea, anorexia, fatigue, bloating, dyspepsia. So the clinical features of Whipple's disease are arthralgia, diarrhea, abdominal pain, weight loss, low-grade fever, and lymphadenopathy, edema due to decreased absorption of nutrients, decreased albumin, there is edema, and there is CNS involvement. So fat is an important component for normal functioning of CNS. We have all the myelin oligodendrocytes where the CNS function is important. Similarly, fat soluble vitamins like vitamin E is important for proper functioning of all the neurons. So there may be CNS involvement because this is an infection. There may be low grade fever. Whipple's disease could be one of the cause for pyrexia of unknown origin. So when patient presents with multi-system disease, so Whipple's disease is one of the differential diagnosis. And CNS involvement is sometimes serious, leading to fatal conditions if it is left untreated. So how do you diagnose Whipple's disease? By demonstration of the bacillus with PCR. So small bowel biopsy is done by endoscopy. Then the bacillus is demonstrated by PCR. And also the infiltration of small intestinal mucosa by foamy macrophages. So lipid-laden macrophages are called foamy macrophages, which stain positive with PAS reagent. So how do you manage? How do you manage? Because this is a infection. This is the bacterial infection. We give antibiotic therapy. So IV ceftriaxone 2 grams daily for 2 weeks is the drug of choice, followed by oral cotrimoxazole. It is given for at least 1 year. So this is a prolonged treatment. So we have to consider the diagnosis of Whipple's disease in all cases of malabsorption because it is a treatable condition. If you give antibiotics, symptoms subside and patient recovers. So if left untreated, it may prove fatal because mostly because of the CNS manifestations. Okay. So till now we have seen celiac disease, tropical sprue, Whipple's disease. Now comes the small bowel overgrowth syndrome or bacterial overgrowth syndrome. So bacterial overgrowth. So there may be the normal flora of the intestine. There are different flora for different parts of the intestine. Certain flora does not grow in certain parts of the intestine. Suppose the gastric acid, it prevents the development of any bacteria in the stomach. But if there is gastric achlorohydria, that is, if the patient is on continuous pantoprazole, continuous PPI use, there may be decreased pH of the gastric secretions. It may lead to growth of microorganisms. Similarly, anatomical abnormality of small intestine with stagnation. Suppose there is a disease of the terminal ileum, and it is resected. Ileocecal wall is resected due to some pathology. So this is an abnormal anatomy. This may lead to stagnation and growth of bacteria. Similarly, if there is any motility disorders, like if the patient has underwent vagotomy because of peptic ulcer disease, or if there is any scleroderma, or there is any diabetic enteropathy that leading to gastroparesis, or there is decreased motility of the intestine leading to stasis of the secretion and growth of bacteria. Similarly, gastrocolic or coloenteric fistula. So every part of intestine has specific flora. If there is any fistula connection between one or two parts, then maybe abnormal migration of the bacteria into that part and leading to abnormal growth. So it is seen in Crohn's disease with many ulcerations and fistulas, or in any malignancy, or if there is any surgical resection, post-surgical resection, it may be complicated by fistulas. So all these lead to bacterial overgrowth. And similarly, in elder patients, for unknown reasons, in elderly patients, if there is decreased acidity of the gastric contents, there may be overgrowth of bacteria. So if the bacteria overgrows, what is the mechanism of malabsorption? Suppose the bacteria which has overgrown, it causes disconjugation of bile salts. So the bile salts which are there, taurocholic acid and deoxytaurocholic acid, the bile salts are disconjugated by the bacteria. The bile salts are required for formation of micelle. Micelle is formed for absorption of fat. So if there is disconjugation, there is inadequate micelle formation. Similarly, if the bacteria are more, they take up the nutrients, the specific nutrients, without them being absorbed. So the microbial uptake of specific nutrients. The bacteria may directly damage the brush border, impairing the absorption of the nutrients. And bile acid diarrhea and osmotic diarrhea. These bile acids and bile salts, which are unabsorbed when they pass into the colon, so they cause the bile acid they precipitate diarrhea. So the carbohydrates which are not absorbed in the intestine, they transit to the colon and they cause osmotic diarrhea. So because of the overgrowth of the bacteria, these mechanisms cause malabsorption of various nutrients. So again, the symptoms are steatorrhea, diarrhea, weight loss, muscle wasting, microcytic anemia or macrocytic anemia, low calcium presenting as paresthesias, tetany, positive trochleus or Chvostek sign, bone pains, pathological fractures, bleeding tendency, edema. So these are the common clinical manifestations. So how do you manage? So if there is, how do you definitely diagnose it is a bacterial overgrowth syndrome? You aspirate and culture the proximal jejunal secretions. If there are more than 10 to the power of 5 organisms per ml, then it is the diagnosis is bacterial overgrowth. However, it is not always possible. Breath test may be done. Breath hydrogen or methane test can be done. If the bacteria, by giving lactose or glucose, if the bacteria are able to ferment, then the test is positive. But it is sometimes non-specific. You can do an imaging test. You can radiologically image by CT or MRI, or go for an endoscopy to see if there are any structural abnormalities, structural factors causing the bacterial overgrowth, to try to correct them. So another thing is you can go for an empirical antibiotic trial, because this is because this is of bacterial overgrowth. You give an empiric antibiotic therapy and see if the patient is responding or not. So how do you manage? You have diagnosed that this is a case of bacterial overgrowth. How do you manage? You manage by, so if there is an anatomical defect, it must be corrected. So because bacteria is there, you have to give antibiotics. So broad spectrum antibiotics which cover both gram-positive, negative and enterobe are given, like ciprofloxacin 500 mg, norfloxacin 400 mg or amoxiclav 875 mg. Or you may give metronidazole. Metronidazole is predominantly for anaerobic cover. And a broad spectrum like trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, Septran, double strength can be given. Or you can give rifaximin. Rifaximin is a luminal antibiotic. So it is not absorbed into the intestine, into the blood, but it remains in the intestine and causes, and it acts against the bacteria. So rifaximin can be given. So long-term antibiotic therapy is indicated. So this bacterial overgrowth syndrome needs long-term antibiotic therapy with appropriate broad spectrum antibiotics. If there is an anatomical defect, it must be corrected. Then the short bowel syndrome. So we have seen celiac disease, tropical sprue, then the Whipple's disease, then the then finally you come for the short bowel syndrome. In the short bowel syndrome, we have short bowel syndrome is due to secondary to removal of significant segments of small intestine. So if there is removal of small, there is surgical procedure. The patient had a disease and there is surgical procedure and they remove major part of the intestine. This leads to malabsorption. Obviously leads to malabsorption of nutrients. So what may be the cause? So patient may have Crohn's disease with multiple ulcers, or there may be mesenteric infarction. There may be radiation enteritis, or there may be volvulus, or there may be a big tumor which needs resection of the intestine, or there may be trauma. And then the intestine has went into gangrene. Then you have to remove those parts of intestine. So large segments are removed. It will lead to what is called a short bowel syndrome. So the short bowel syndrome, the amount of malabsorption or degree of malabsorption will depend on the length and the site of resection. Suppose the site is at the terminal ileum. So what are the nutrients which are absorbed at terminal ileum are not being absorbed after the resection. So, if there is a 100 to 200 segment of the entire small intestine is resected, then there is major loss of all the nutrients, leading to what is called a short bowel syndrome. This short bowel syndrome is also called intestinal failure because the intestine has failed to do its job. It has failed to absorb the nutrients. So as you can see the cartoon, what are the consequences of ileal resection? So some part of the ileum has been resected. Then there is a decreased bile salt pool and lithogenic bile leading to gallstones. So there is impaired micelle formation. So there is impaired micelle formation, and if the micelle formation is impaired, then there is defective absorption of the fat. So the bile salts which are not absorbed, they reach the colon, and impaired bile salt absorption, it leads to watery diarrhea. And usually the calcium which is present, so the bile salts usually bind to the calcium. Usually physiologically the calcium binds to oxalate and prevents its absorption in the large intestine. And now the bile salts have not been absorbed in the small intestine and reach the colon. They bind to the calcium and prevent the calcium to bind to oxalate. So oxalate is absorbed into the blood circulation. This oxalate is excreted into the urine, causing oxalate calculus. So, and similarly, if the terminal ileum is resected, then there is defective absorption of B12. So all these are consequences of resection of small intestine or ileum. So if there is resection of terminal ileum, then we have bile salt and vitamin B12 malabsorption, leading to vitamin B12 deficiency and watery diarrhea. If there is extensive small bowel resection, then there is gross deficiency of nutrient, water, gross malabsorption of nutrients, water and electrolytes, leading to weight loss and diarrhea. So how do you treat? If there is bile salt malabsorption, then you give bile salt binding resins like cholestyramine 2 to 4 grams TID or cholesevelam to 625 mg 1 to 3 tablets BD. Suppose if there is weight loss and diarrhea and extensive bowel resection, then you can give anti-motility drugs, anti-diarrheal drugs like loperamide 2 to 4 mg TID or octreotide, which decreases the amount of secretion and also decreases the motility. So because major part of the small bowel is resected, there is obviously decreased absorption of nutrients. So our goal for treatment should be to provide nutrition, water, electrolytes in oral, either orally or in a different form, to maintain health and normal body weight. So most of the time, if there is complete intestinal failure post surgery, then the patient is shifted to parenteral nutrition. So you utilize the enteral or oral routes as much as possible, but if it's not possible, you go for parenteral nutrition. So obviously, when there are no nutrients absorbed, patient will have florid manifestations of vitamin deficiencies, like there may be anemia due to B12 and iron deficiency or folic acid deficiency. There may be bleeding manifestation. There may be decreased vitamin D, and there may be easy bruising due to vitamin K deficiency. You have to treat all the underlying complications as well as the intestinal failure. So you have to supplement all this to the patient. If as majority of the major part of the bowel has been resected. So you want to allow the patient to have a good quality of life by providing all this medication. So again, this is a repeat slide I have kept again and again because these are the manifestation of the malabsorption. So the major amount of ileum is resected, then the patient will have steatorrhea, diarrhea, weight loss, muscle wasting, decreased absorption of iron leading to microcytic anemia, decreased absorption of B12 and folic acid resulting in macrocytic anemia, decreased calcium. So there is paresthesia, tetany, atrocious, and Chostek sign. There may be bone pains, pathological fracture. There may be bleeding tendency because of decreased vitamin K and prolonged PT and INR. Edema due to decreased total proteins, albumin, increased fecal loss of alpha-1 antitrypsin. So all these are clinical manifestations and the corresponding laboratory findings. There may be other etiologies for malabsorption like A-beta lipoproteinemia. A-beta lipoproteinemia is a disease in which there is deficiency of lipoprotein B, apolipoprotein B. So if these lipoproteins are required for absorption of the lipids. So if they are absent, there is defective absorption of the lipids, leading to bloating sensation, steatorrhea, and diarrhea. So how do you treat this A beta lipoproteinemia? Because it is genetic disease, there is no B100. You supplement the patient with low fat diet, medium chain triglycerides, and ADEK because ADEK are fat soluble vitamins. If fat is not being absorbed, you have to supplement the ADEK separately. So you provide the low fat diet with medium chain triglycerides. So we have completed, we have seen what is malabsorption syndrome. We have first seen what is the normal physiology, the gross overview of the physiology of absorption. Then we have seen what is malabsorption, what are the various etiologies. We have discussed about celiac disease, then tropical sprue, then Whipple's disease, bacterial overgrowth, and short bowel syndrome, and then other causes like A beta lipoproteinemia. So malabsorption syndrome are disorders in which there is disruption of digestion and nutrient absorption. So various etiologies we have seen. So what are the clinical manifestation? Patient will have steatorrhea, bulky light colored stools, diarrhea, weight loss, muscle wasting, microcytic and macrocytic anemia if there are iron and B12 deficient, paresthesias and tetany, positive Trocheus Chostek sign due to decreased calcium and magnesium, bone pain and pathological fractures due to decreased vitamin D and calcium, bleeding tendency due to decreased absorption of vitamin K, prolonged PT and iron due to prolonged PT and INR, and there may be edema due to hypoalbuminemia or decreased total proteins. And if the patient is milk intolerant, there may be cramps, bloating, diarrhea. This is due to if the lactose is not absorbed, malabsorbed, then the patient will have milk intolerance, producing all the cramp, abdominal bloating, and diarrheal symptoms. So this summarizes today's topic. So if you have any queries, you can ask. So you're having no queries, then I will ask some questions. Anyone of you can explain the iron absorption? How does the iron get absorbed in the blood from the diet? What is the physiology? It is absorbed in the duodenum. Can you explain the physiology? How is it absorbed? With roll number 121. Roll number 121. Roll number 121, can you hear me? Who will answer? Roll number 15. Roll number 15. Roll number 121. 16. Roll number 16 can answer. Those who know the answer can answer. You don't know how iron is absorbed? You have been explained about iron absorption in hematology, I think. You had an exam on hematology. Can anyone tell me what is pernicious anemia? '73. 73 can answer. Intrinsic factor deficiency. Okay. So what is a Chostek sign? So we have seen if the patient has decreased calcium, there may be paresthesias, atony, Trocher's sign or Chostek sign. What is Chostek sign? Can anyone explain? Who is roll number 27? Roll number 121. Roll number 27. Who is roll number 27? Can anyone tell me about the Whipple's disease? You just heard about Whipple's disease. So can anyone tell me what is Whipple's disease? What is the cause? How do you treat? You can unmute and answer. Roll number 87. So all these malabsorption syndromes are short note answers in the final examination. Please go and read in the Davidson to go through the topic. So Whipple's disease infection with Triphorema whipple that obstruct the lymphatic drainage. Okay. What are the causes of bacterial overgrowth? We have heard about bacterial overgrowth syndrome. We have enumerated some causes of bacterial overgrowth. Can anyone tell me the causes? Roll number 60. Yes, prolonged PPI use. Okay. If you know the answer, you can unmute yourself and speak. Yes, if there is any anatomical abnormality, then any motility disorder like patient underwent vagotomy or there is scleroderma. Yes, in elderly patients. Injury to the bowel. Okay. Then so if there is bacterial overgrowth, then why should you have malabsorption? What is the mechanism of malabsorption bacterial overgrowth? What does the bacteria do? Excess bacteria will cause it will microbial uptake of the nutrients will be there. So the bacteria itself will take up the nutrients. Then roll number 60. So why will be there inadequate mucilage formation? Disconjugation of bile salts. Yes. So what is the treatment of bacterial overgrowth? How do you diagnose it and how do you treat it? You can unmute yourself and answer the question if you know. You have to give antibiotics, isn't it? What are the antibiotics which will you give? Which you will give? Roll number 15. You can unmute yourself and answer. Roll number 49. Yes, we have spoken about tetracycline and tropical sprue. Okay, broad spectrum antibiotics for bacterial overgrowth, such as fluoroquinolones. or metronidazole and Septran, cotrimoxazole. Rule number 7. What is the definition of malabsorption? Malabsorption syndrome. Rule number 007. So what is the definitive test for the diagnosis of celiac disease? Definitive investigation for the diagnosis of celiac disease. Biopsy of what? Biopsy of skin or what? Someone has said biopsy. So it's duodenal biopsy. Okay, what do you find in duodenal biopsy? Yes, there is villus atrophy. Then lymphocytic duodenosis. Only few people are trying to answer. Rest of the kept the laptop aside, kept their mobile aside. So what is the treatment of choice for the celiac disease? Rule number 49. Rule number 23. Yes, it is gluten-free diet. So you have to give diet free of gluten, minerals and vitamin supplements. There are certain special recipes made exclusively for patients who are gluten sensitive, so who have patient celiac disease. So if they adhere to such recipes, then they can maintain a good quality of life. So we'll complete the session for today. Please go through your Davidson regarding this topic. It is an important topic from examination point of view. All 5 topics are important from malabsorption. Okay, thank you.